It's almost universal, whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels, 18 wheels, no wheels. So many of us have a special memory involving a vehicle or a story about a car we've loved. Even if you can't tell a crankshaft from a drive shaft, I want to hear the story of the vehicle that moved you. I'm Blake Jackson, and this is Auto-Biography. Next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast. This is awesome. A Saskatchewan boy, a prairie boy, just like me. In fact, we had almost the same stomping grounds growing up. A prairie boy, now a Red Deer boy. Please welcome Mr. Brad Walker. Brad, tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
All right. Thanks, Blake. The vehicle that I most memorable was actually my first one, right when I was 16. I had an 83 Trans Am, which was exactly like Knight Rider.
Just going to pause for a sec and tell you about the Pontiac Trans Am. Now, full disclosure, I was lazy. I didn't write anything down, so we're just going to wing this one. But in 1969, Pontiac wanted a performance version of the Firebird, so they came up with the iconic Trans Am. Now, I know you're familiar with this car if you grew up in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or even now. KITT, Knight Industries 2000 from Knight Rider, or the car from Smokey and the Bandit, or Smokey and the Bandit 2. Through the years and the 4 generations, the Trans Am had everything under the hood from the 455 big block to the 301 turbo. And, fun fact, from the factory, every Trans Am came new with a comb for your super sexy mustache.
The style of that car and the pop-up headlights, just, everything about the T-tops. Again, I wish I had kept it, but now I guess I got to go find a project car here sometime in the future.
So you grew up in a town called Rosetown. Was that where you found the car?
Yes, it was stuck on the side of the ditch, per se, at the elevator. I think it must have been one of the sons of an elevator agent, and it was there for about a year or so, right around the time I was turning 16. And so we kept, every time we'd haul some grain to town, we're like, I wonder if they're selling that. I wonder, it's been sitting there a long time. I'm sure they don't want it sitting there any longer. And so it turns out we did. We got a good deal on it and brought it back to life. It didn't take too much. It was still running well. But yeah, that became my first car. I don't know if it was a good idea in hindsight for my dad to say, hey, you got to drive a lot of gravel at minus 40 weather and ice swept roads, but here's a 305 high performance for you, young guy. But I don't know, it worked out.
Well, you're here, you're alive, so that's the main thing. So
yeah, exactly.
Going on our basic age, so this would have been about 14 years old by the time you had it. Did you have to do any work to get it going again?
Not really. No, the quick oil change, battery, obvious things like that. What did we end up doing? One of the sides was faded because it was sitting in the sun so long that direction. And so we painted one side. We tried to butt match it as best we could. And again, it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for being 16, and I wasn't one to complain. So I was very appreciative of having that. And it worked out well for sure. Later in life, 2 years later when I graduated and I took auto body in Moose Jaw for a couple of years. Okay. So we did a frame off restoration on that car in the class, which was awesome.
What?
Yep. And all we had to pay was supplies.
That is a dream come true for a gearhead.
It really was awesome. And the mechanics did the engine. So it went over to them for a week or two, and then it came to us, and we did the full on body. Yeah, it was so good. The color we went with at the time, so it was a silver car, but we definitely made it more modern. At the year it was 97 that we did this. We turned it to a 97 Ford Flairside color, that silver that was on the trucks.
Yeah,
pretty sharp at the time. So yeah, we went with that, and then the highlight along the bottom and the rear spoiler and the front 2 little cowls. They were black naturally, but we made them such a dark purple from a Porsche color that you couldn't tell until they were in the right sun, and then they were purple. I
never knew that you took auto body. Did you work in that career for a while?
I only did for a year. I have a passion, for vehicles and the way they look, and now I have a respect for the people who work on them because my gosh, is that hard work, and it's an art. It really is. And so I wasn't patient enough per se, so I ended up just changing career paths, went into construction for a while, and then elsewhere into power engineering. But I definitely got an appreciation for what those guys do. And I like painting, definitely, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I can handle that, but the sanding and the actual mudding and the metalwork wasn't wasn't my thing. I was no good at it.
Give me an update on the Trans Am after you went in your auto body shop and they did all the work and the mechanics did all the work on the engine. What ended up happening to the Trans Am?
Well, believe it or not, at that time, my sister was just turning 16, and I needed to upgrade to more reliable winter type vehicle, I guess we'll say, front wheel drive, something or other. So, so she ended up getting that Trans Am, and she drove it for a couple years, and then she needed something new too. And then I think Dad just sold it, and I really wish I could track that car down. I don't know how I'd ever do it, if I could find the VIN number or search somehow. But yeah, if not, I think long-term future, other than we do want to eventually do a Volkswagen microbus.
Oh.
But I think an 86 Trans Am is on my list of cars to do too.
A prairie boy, I can speak from experience too. And you spoke of growing up on the farm and back roads when it's minus 40 and back roads in general. On the prairies, people drive around a lot. We have a lot of fun in our cars. I don't know if you can talk about it too much, but was there anything memorable that happened in or because of that car?
Yes, I got a couple that are actually semi-G rated. So, and actually before we did the motor at the Auto-Body school, I actually had to put another engine in that when I was about 16 and a half. So I was heading down south of Rosestown towards Elrose one night after hockey, and I turned onto a grid road. I was heading with a girlfriend at the time, and the check engine light came on, but I was like, it's minus 40. I got 6 more miles to go. I can make this, right? And I was wrong. About a mile later, put a rod through the pan, and sitting there with no farmyards in sight for probably 2 miles, and probably not dressed for the weather, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, what am I going to do? So as I was sitting, there's no cell phones back then. Like, I think there was bag cell phones, but only farmers had those in their trucks, but not kids that aren't driving around. They're driving around where they're not supposed to be, probably late at night.
Yeah.
So anyways, I didn't have one. And I was just, at the same time, I was thinking of, what am I going to do? Am I going to try to bundle up somehow and run to that farm that's 2 miles away? And I'm like, this is how bad stories start, right? And but actually some farmer, and this is midnight, and a farmer came and grabbed me and took me the extra 5 miles to the place I needed to go. And I don't know how he would have seen me at midnight or what was going on, but that's pretty darn lucky in my opinion.
So you weren't on the highway either. You were on the
I turned off. I turned off. I was a couple miles off the highway. So it was either go back to the highway, and then you stand there, you don't know who's going to come by at midnight, or go to that farmyard that I could see a light. And I was sitting there debating what to do because I had a little bit of residual heat left in the car. Mm-hmm. And actually, then I started seeing these headlights come down the driveway, and I was like, I think he's coming this way. I couldn't believe it, really. In the end, I was so lucky, and yes, whoever that guy was, I really can't remember who it was. It was an elderly farmer, but I'm very thankful.
Very fortunate.
Yeah. So then, that was the next story. So then I had to tell Dad the check engine light came on, but I thought I could make it. And I guess if I would have stopped then and checked the oil, there wouldn't have been any. And but same situation, I would have been stuck right where I was anyway. But nonetheless, we threw a new engine in. I didn't get the high performance after that. I went down to the 305 and it was just fine still. But then later in Auto-Body school, we souped her up again. So,
what did you do to soup it up?
The mechanics took care of that, but they made it a 305 high performance again somehow. If they bored it or what they did, I really don't know the details behind that, but it worked very good after that. That's for sure.
Nice. Automatic?
Yep, actually it was the automatic for sure. Yeah. So it wasn't like the super crazy car, but it could get you in trouble if you were driving like a D-Gen, that's for sure.
Yeah. So if you are cruising, I mean back then, well let's do a retrospective. So out cruising with the tunes back then, and everybody had to have a stereo and at least a good pair of 6x9s in their car. Versus now. So if you were picking the music back then for your cruise versus picking the music now for your cruise, what sort of music are we talking about?
At the time, it would have been a lot of Pantera, and then the grunge scene was big at the time, of course. So your Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, Nirvana. But I was raised on hair metal, so it always was coming back into rotation. I didn't care what year it was, what month it was. There was always a hair metal disc coming back in through there. And speaking of discs, so it had a tape player, the factory tape player when we bought it. And then you had those tape player converters to your Discman.
Yeah.
That was the staple in there for a couple months until I could afford a deck. And then, yes, the normal 6x9s were right by your ear in the back seat there. Remember the hump in the middle?
Yeah.
And then the two back seats. And then the 6x9 was right in your ear. So then eventually I upgraded the 6x9s. And I sort of did everything in steps, naturally. And then finally some subs and an amp. And the cool thing about the trunk in the Trans Am was it sort of drop down at the very back there. You remember that at all?
No.
And so you could fit 2 stuff down there perfectly and still be flush across the back. So you could fit, a big suitcase or a hockey bag or something in the back and the hatch, which was nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, definitely did it in steps, but always had some form of stereo in my car because music's a big part of my life. And but yeah, at the time it would have been definitely stuff heavy. But I love the alternative that could listen to with your passengers and not completely make them alienated,
Yeah.
So I loved anything that MTV, when it still played videos, played essentially. And yeah, definitely more the rock vein though, that's for sure. I was listening to 7 Mary 3 the other day and that took me back.
So we don't hear too much hair metal, but I believe we should hear more. If there was one go-to hair metal song you could recommend, what would it be?
Someone Like You by Bang Tango.
I don't know that one, but I'm going to look it up as soon as I leave the studio.
You won't be disappointed, man. The guitars, the vocals, just the bass, like it's 100% perfect.
Okay.
And yeah, it's my staple.
I'll look it up. Now, how about these days? What are you listening to?
I'm really into like skate punk, California skate punk. I like it fast. I like it political, educating. Like, yeah, Bad Religion's still going strong. I love them. Good Riddance. Strung Out is my favorite because they have a bit of metal to them, and they're super talented. But their vocalist can just belt out the coolest stuff he writes. So, and actually, I just got tickets for my first post-COVID concert, and it's Propagandy in Calgary in October. And I'm super excited to see them again. They're amazing live. And then from Winnipeg.
Some of the best bands come from the prairies.
Cousins are in Age of Electric, and I know they cut their teeth here before they moved to Vancouver. So I'm super proud of them and their accomplishments. And yeah, they came right from Lanigan, Saskatchewan.
And Took.
Absolutely, yes. I love listening to that stuff right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of Took lately. And I guess if you could explain what it is.
Well, it's my cousin Todd Kearns and a bunch of his buddies from Canada. I believe there's a guy from Innisfail and maybe a guy or two from Winnipeg. And they do covers exclusively of Canadian radio rock from the 80s mainly. They do, I guess they did a Alanis Morissette cover, and they have one original tune that I know of so far, but probably 24 other great covers they've done, anywhere from Tom Cochrane to Rush, you name it, Sheriff. It's great stuff. And yeah, Todd's voice, no matter who he's trying to cover, he can make it sound perfect, but yet his own. Yeah. Again, super proud of his accomplishments and enjoy listening to his stuff to this day.
If you are going out somewhere and you want an excuse to speed, either look up Go for a Soda by Took or Thinking of You by Took.
And then Crying Over You by Platinum Blonde is another one I love.
Brad Walker, I'm glad you came on. This is perfect, hearing about the Prairie Days with the Trans Am. And we grew up on Knight Rider.
Exactly. What a show, right?
Did you? Okay, I have to ask then. When we were young, that's when they called them the sex lights were a big deal. Did you have like blinking lights and that sort of stuff in your car?
I had them, but they were just like the low end version because all I did was take the covers off and I spray painted them with spray paint. So I had blue at one point, and then I'd scratch them off, use some paint thinner on them, and then paint them red or whatever, depending on the mood I was in that week per se. And threw those up under the footwell and then up above. Yeah, totally. Of course he had sex lights in a Trans Am.
See, this is another thing about growing up on the prairies. It's resourcefulness. This is what you learn out there. You're on the farm. You have to survive. You have to make your own sex lights.
Exactly. And another thing, I was pretty OCD about keeping it clean. Mm-hmm. So here I am. I got 4 miles of gravel to drive, but I would just wash it spotlessly, polish it and everything, even down to the rims, and then I'd go drive 4 kilometers of gravel and it'd be just filthy.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did I spend all that time? But it was just the thing I had to do.
I can completely relate now, living in Penhold like I do, which is outside of Red Deer. I'll scrub and polish and chamois and do all of that just to get it dirty again. It's the process.
It is, right? And you get to know your vehicle that way way better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spend time on it. Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us today. I do hope that you get to see your 83 Trans Am once again.
Yep. I'll let you know how that goes when I see you next time around.
Okay, perfect. And I do hope you get the VW van as well. But thanks for the tips on the music, and I hope you and the family have a great summer.
Yeah, and you as well. Thanks for calling.
There you go. Brad Walker grew up in Saskatchewan, and that's a farm boy's dream. Came across a Trans Am at a grain elevator and had your college class fix it up, body and engine and everything like that. And Brad is one of the biggest music lovers that I know. After we recorded that interview, he said, "Yeah, I'll send you a few songs." He sent me a Spotify list with 25 hours worth of music on it, which I'm chipping through. Great guy. So thank you very much, Brad. It's time for another story about a vehicle that moved a very special guest. Next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast. Born in Alberta before relocating to Nashville, he's won a Juno for Best Country Recording, 5 Canadian Country Music Awards, and a SOCAN Songwriter of the Year Award, making music with the Road Hammers, and of course, Clayton Bellamy and the Congregation. Next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast is Clayton Bellamy. Clayton, tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
Oh man, there's so many. I don't know where to start. I think the first one, or the main one that I probably have to talk about, would be a 1969 GTO Judge.
Gonna pause for a sec and tell you about the GOAT, the Pontiac GTO Judge. Now, with the GTO beginning production in 1963 as one of the most successful cars of the muscle car era, the Judge was introduced in 1969 as a low-cost option to compete with the Roadrunner, though it was $332 more expensive than a base GTO. Originally only available in Carousel Red, the Judge, named after a laugh-in routine, came with rally wheels, Hurst shifter, and the 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3, putting out 366 horsepower. Another notable option was the tachometer mounted on the hood.
My father and I have been building and still working on the car for the last 20 years. He found it in a field when he was still driving truck hauling grain for a farmer. And there was trees growing up through it, and it was just sitting there rusting away. Yeah. And so he approached the farmer and he said, "Listen, what I'll do is if you'll trade me that GTO, I'll haul your grain for you for free." And the guy jumped on it. So he hauled it, and then we went back one more trip with the flat deck and loaded the car on it and brought it home. And my buddy and I, my best friend and I, stripped the car. That was kind of our job. We did all the grunt work, and there had been mice living in there. There was probably 2 5-gallon pails of grain inside, like under the back seat and in the trunk, that mice had just been pulling in there and storing, or what, I don't know. It was awful, so we stripped it all out, and my best friend who was helping me, he's actually is a sand blaster, so we blasted the whole thing under and over, as we had pulled the engine out as well, so it was just the frame and everything, and just started fixing it up, and it's been something that I'm sure a lot of people can attest to. A vehicle, when you get to spend, for me, wrenching with my dad is the best time that you can get with somebody. You're under the hood, but you're not just working on stuff. You're working on a relationship, which is great. And we spend hours. And now my son, his grandson, is also helping us, and we get it up on the hoist and go through it, and always knocking around on it, especially in the winter when there's nothing to do. And I look forward to those times so much.
So with the Judge, that was pretty much the top of the line muscle car back then, wasn't it?
It was one of them. And, also out of one of my all-time favorite movies, Dazed and Confused, that was the main vehicle in that movie, which was so great. So it is, and they're fairly rare, and very sought after.
Has this Judge showed up in any videos or anything like that?
It has, actually. For one of my early videos for the Clayton Bellamy band, it was in a song called "Straight Into the Sun," which is funny because the song is called "Straight Into the Sun," and we were desperately trying to get a sunset that day. That we had one day to shoot the video, and it was like raining and cloudy and gross all day. We're like, we're not going to get a sunset. We're not going to be able to drive straight into the sun on the song. It's called "Straight Into the Sun." So I remember going down the highway with that car, just like 100 and as fast as we could go,
Yeah.
trying to catch the sunset, trying to outrun the clouds because the sun was peeking through. And yet we went all the way from Bonneville to Glendon, which is about normally a 25-minute drive, but it was a heck of a lot shorter that day.
That sounds like a song in itself right there.
Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, it was a great day. But that you could see that video online, and I don't think I've had it in any other videos.
Your dad and your son are both working on it with you. What's left in this restoration?
Well, you know what? It was actually we fully restored it, and then 2 years ago it went about 10 years fully restored, and then 2 years ago we saw a little bit of bubbling on the hood and a little bit on the trunk. Thought, oh, we better take it in and get that fixed. Well, just getting that fixed turned into the hoods. You know how it is when they start digging.
Yeah.
You find way more. The hood was done. The trunk was done. So we ended up my dad wanted to redo the engine anyway. So we popped the engine, and it helps that my father, give you a little context, is a motorcycle and small engines mechanic.
Okay.
So he's, he knows what he's doing. And I grew up in the back of a shop, just, following him around, grabbing him wrenches my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got all of the kind of tools here. So we pulled the engine and hauled the car into to a place here in Bonneville, Alberta. And they completely redid the car, repainted it.
So how old's your son?
He's 16. He just got himself his first vehicle. So, I can see that trend of, because now all he talks about is saving up money so wants to change this on his truck and fix that and do this and do that. I just think that it's so exciting when we, do the same thing. We were out wrenching on his truck a couple weekends ago and just service stuff. But, again, it's that tradition of it's, spending time under the hood is more than just working on the vehicle. I always feel like it's time well spent. You can strengthen a relationship. You can solve all kinds of problems you might be going through.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like it can be a little bit of zen time.
Yeah. My
first car that I owned was a 68 Chevelle. It was a 2-door post. And my dad and I got that on the road. And, when you're driving a hot rod, you better learn how to, especially, not to want to date myself, but there was no cell phones. Mm-hmm. So, you had to be resourceful, because when the thing broke off or when the vacuum line blew off the carb or whatever, you had to be able to figure that stuff out and get your ass home.
Yeah. I'm the same way. There were cell phones, but they were all in a big vinyl bag that you had to plug into the cigarette lighter.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I like that about hot rods too. Like it's, to me, motorcycle. I'm a big motorcycle fanatic, and bikes and hot rods are the same thing. When you're driving your hot rod, you can't do anything else because they're loud, they're noisy. You got to hear the car. Yeah. Also, I feel like you want to hear it if it's knocking or if something's not right, because hot rods are like choppers. So there's always chopperisms, hot rodisms.
Yeah.
So to me, it becomes a bit of a meditation when you're out driving your car, same as with your motorcycle, because you can't do anything else. You can't really listen to the radio. You can't be on your phone. You can't be doing anything. It's just you and the car and the road. And I really love that.
So when you're out on the road touring with the band or the bands, what's the preferred method of transportation?
Well, most of the time we're planes, trains, and automobiles. We don't get to take any of our vehicles with us, unfortunately. The odd time I'll take out the car if it's a something that's close by. I know we're going to have a show here in my hometown of Bonneville this summer, and for sure I'll be taking the guys out for a rip in the hot rod. Yeah. Go cruise a couple laps.
What's happening with the band right now? What are you up to?
Well, things have been starting to pick up, thank God. The phone's been ringing. We've been out doing some shows. We've got a brand new record called Back at It, and the latest single called Giver, which is very, could be your guys' theme song, I think.
Yeah.
For the podcast. Giver is out now. It just went out to radio this week, so we're really excited about that, and it's a really great song. It's all about that. it's a very Canadian saying to say giver. When you go to America or you go to Australia, wherever we travel, when you say let's give her, people are like, what? Give her what? Give who? And we're like, no, it's only in Canada that people say that, and they know exactly what you mean when you say give her.
Yeah.
Give her hell.
Yeah.
You know, put the pedal to the floor, crank the throttle.
Yeah.
And so it's such a fun song, and it talks all about that. You just get out and give her.
I was actually watching the video today getting ready for the interview, and I like it a lot. I like the video a lot.
It's a lot of fun, for sure.
And do you ever take a tour bus?
We have, and it's I'll tell you, one of my best memories is watching, when I moved to Nashville years ago, watching the tour bus pull up in front of my house for me to load up my gear and go on the road. It was like, you know, I waited my whole life for that moment where, you know, it was one of those moments where it was a dream come true, because it's like, you know, when you're on the tour bus, it's like you've made it. You know, maybe you haven't made it, but you've definitely reached you've broken a certain plateau when you be able to roll around on the tour bus. It's quite a feeling, and I never get used to it, and I never ever take it for granted. It's always such a cool feeling to be able to go out on tour on the tour bus.
Have you seen that scene from Almost Famous where they're singing Tiny Dancer?
Yes.
Whenever I hear tour bus, that's exactly what I think of.
And you know what? It's very much like that. The tour bus is it's like a time machine. It's like a time capsule, because you get on there usually after the show, and everybody's amped up, so nobody goes to bed. You know, the bus gets loaded and you roll out of town to the next town, and you're up till, you know, 2, 3 in the morning. You go to sleep and you wake up and you're in a completely different, you don't know where you are. You're in a completely different place. You just appeared somewhere. And then you go do the exact same thing, and you get back on the time capsule, and you play and sing your way out of town, usually, you know, because we're jamming or doing whatever, writing songs, or just, you know, staying up and cracking jokes and causing trouble.
I'm not sure if this is true with you, but I've heard that some musicians, when on a tour, especially a long one, will lose track of what city they're in. Does that ever happen to you?
That has happened to me. Yeah. It happens quite easily, because you're on the move so much when you're, you know, when we were in Nashville and we had our deal with in Nashville, we were playing, you know, 250 shows a year, and you're just gone. It's all you do. You're just gone. A lot of those years are just a blur to me. You know, the guys will say all the time, "Oh, remember that time we played that blah blah blah." I'm like, I don't know, was I there? But it does. I remember pulling into Moose Jaw one time and not having. Everyone was gone. They got up before me and they went off for breakfast. And I got out of the bus and wandered around and had to find a newspaper to figure out what town I was in. I was like, I don't know where I am, because we didn't stop. The bus driver had just stopped to grab food, and everyone wanted breakfast. And so we weren't in our destination. I just I don't know where I am. And after a while, all towns start to look the same.
Yeah. I guess being on a bus like that, it must be like having roommates. Are there any standing rules when you're on a tour that everyone has to abide by?
Absolutely. Yeah. First and foremost, the most important, never any number 2s on the bus. You cannot. Go out in the field if you have to, but no number 2s on the bus. Most of the time there's a fine. The bus companies will fine you if you do that. But the other ones, you know, it's really important when you're on a bus, because, you know, people, as glamorous as it does sound, as exciting as it is, you also have to remember, if you're just one tour bus, like most of the time it's just one, there's 4 guys in the band, plus there's 2 crew guys, usually, plus a sound man, plus the bus driver. So that's 9 people on a bus, on one bus. That's a lot of people in one little pod. So you have to be really conscious of your space, keeping your, you know, not strewing your stuff all over, and keeping everything clean, so that you know, just respecting everyone else's space. And then the other thing is that the bunks, so how, for some people who don't know, there's a front lounge with usually 2 couches, a little kitchenette area where there'll be a fridge and a little coffee station, like a 2x2 counter, like very small, and then a bathroom in the front lounge. And you go to the middle of the bus is the galley, where all the bunks are. So there'll be 3, 6, 9, usually 12 bunks or 8, depending on how big they are. And you just lay in there. It's like a little coffin. And usually it never fails. There's always one person in the band at the beginning, first week of the tour, who forgets that, you fall asleep and you go to sit up to get up to pee or whatever. And you forget that you're sleeping in a bunk and you smack your head on the roof of the bunk above you. So you end up with a big goose egg on your forehead.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course there's the back lounge, which is usually like a circular kind of couch thing with a TV and a stereo, and you kind of hang out back there as well. And there's closets back there where you can hang your clothes and stuff like that.
What are the movies and what are the TV shows you're all watching together?
Lots of we love watching band documentaries and things like that. Good. That's always good stuff to pass the time. Lots of like the rock and roll films, or a good action movie is always good. A bunch of dudes on the bus.
Yeah.
But for me, I love getting back to building cars. I love watching those car building shows
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it, and wishing I could do it.
Is there a car that you've wanted to get your hands on?
No, you put me on the spot. You know what? I would love to have a 1970 Chevelle SS. The 70 when they changed the front nose like that. Something like that would be great. Or the 66 GTO is really great too, with the stacked headlights. I kind of have a thing for the older, longer kind of almost boat style cars, I love the late 60s Cadillacs, like the two-door DeVilles, or even one step up from that, the what's the boat tail?
The Riviera.
The Rivieras. It's like 1970, 71 Riviera with the boat tail with that funny window. Anything I can really sink my teeth into and just get out and rip. I think I've soon here. I've got several friends that do this too. It's like you'll get a car and you'll drive it you'll own it for a while and you'll drive it, tinker with it, and then sell it, get a different one, drive it, tinker with it, sell it, and just keep trying different things. It's fun. I'd love to have a 68 DeVille. I've been looking for a long time, just all done up with the skirts lowered, blacked out windows, even blacked out grills and no chrome, just all painted black. I think that would be cool. One part of that, I think, romanticism for me is that when back in the day in Nashville, if you had a hit, the first thing you did was you got a Cadillac. all of the old country guys, like the 60s guys, Elvis, same thing. You got the hit and you went out and you got the Cadillac. And I just always thought about that, and I thought, man, how cool would that be to we've been blessed to have lots of hits in the Hammers, and it would be really cool to have a souped up old caddy, but like with some good jam under the hood. That's the one thing they kind of roll like you're riding on a big sofa, but it would be cool to find one that was really done up, get it on airbags so you can just suck it right down to the road. It'd be fun.
I want to talk about tour riders. I've always been curious about this. When you are on tour, you're a pretty down-to-earth guy. Tour riders, of course, bands and artists will have a list of requirements that they need to play a gig, And Van Halen famously had the no green M&Ms. What's the craziest thing, or what's the most, in your mind, outlandish thing you've ever put on a rider?
Before I tell you, I will say there was reasoning behind I thought they were brown, but whatever, M&Ms, the green M&Ms. There was a reason behind that. I don't know if you knew.
Yeah.
The reason why Van Halen's manager put that in there was because it was about attention to detail. Mm-hmm. He could walk into a dressing room and know that if the green M&Ms were in the bowl, that there was probably going to be problems. And if they were out, then he was like, okay, they were listening. Mm-hmm. They read the rider, and that was his little litmus test. For us, it's we get a hard time about this all the time, but it's tube socks. I put that on there years ago, a 12-pack of men's black socks.
Why?
And it's partly because I just want new socks. But the other thing is that the one thing that you go through the most when you're on the road is socks, because you're going through like double, because at least for me, it's like working out for 90 minutes. You're sweating, you're running around. So you're going through double the amount of socks when you're on the road. So if you can, at every show, get a 12 pack, everyone gets a new pair of socks every day at every stop. It's like, it just helps. You don't have to do laundry, and you come home and you got brand new socks in your drawer.
That's actually a really cool idea. I like that. That's practical too.
Well, I'm trying to be a practical guy.
Well, I thank you for your time. It was good to hear about the GTO and working with your son and your dad. And we'll look for that on the video. We'll look for your new album. Once again, when's it coming out?
Yeah, the new album is out August 20th. It's called Back at It by the Road Hammers. And they can listen to the latest. The 2 of the songs off the album are out now. They can hear, if you want to listen to them on wherever you get your music, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. It's up there, and you can check out the videos on YouTube. And man, thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I love the show. I'm a car guy, and I'm going to be listening. I can't wait.
Clayton Bellamy, thank you very much. And of course, Clayton and the Road Hammers have the #1 country album in Canada as I record this, Giver. Check it out. Thank you very much to Clayton Bellamy. Thank you very much to Brad Walker. And thank you very much to you for tuning into the Auto-Biography podcast. I want stories. I want to hear everything, whether it was a Festiva or a Ferrari. If you have a story about the vehicle that moved you, let me know. You can check me out, Spotify, iTunes, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere that you get your podcasts. And we will see you again soon on the Auto-Biography podcast. Until then, keep your wheels on the road and a tarp on your load.